Click on a little button. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm very glad you all joined us today. Welcome to our Ranch Right LLC monthly webinar, Understanding Your Financials. And today we're going to deviate from what some people would call financials, and we are going to talk about inventory. But as all of you know, inventory is a huge part of your financials. So Walter Lynn is going to be presenting today. Most of you know Walter. He is our accounting mentor and advisor. We have a new title for him at the company. He is a wise guide, spelled G-U-Y-D-E. So he is not only master of good dad jokes, but also pretty masterful in the world of accounting and all things HMI, RFP, understanding ag, regen, et cetera, et cetera. So
hello, John.
Hello, how are you, Frank?
Okay, I'll mute myself. Get that.
Yeah, good. Hey, anyway, there are a couple things we're going to visit about today with regards to inventory. Walter's going to talk about some conceptual and some practical things. As some of us talked about in Oklahoma while we were down there for our January meeting with Wally and Claremore, we are going to talk about some forms that we have got to deal with inventory in our process. And I want to just demonstrate a few of those or show a few of those. And then we will talk from there. One of the things I am hoping is that this is always a discussion. So if you have a question, stop us, don't wait. And I know it's awkward on Zoom because you got to unpause your mic and then you got to you got to get somebody's attention. Please do it. We will back up. We will make things clear. So don't feel like you got to wait. Go ahead and interrupt. So with that, Walter, do you want to go ahead and get started? Also, so all of you know, this is recorded. And so if you want to watch it again, because sometimes Walter flies through some pretty difficult concepts, you can watch it again and again to your heart's desire. So anyway, with that, Walter, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm in Springfield, Illinois. It's a little gray and overcast. Been getting a little rain here, and so anyway, it's gonna. I want to make sure that, and I mean, it's really interesting to see the crowd here, and there seems to be a great youthful crowd here. It gives me a lot of hope on where the agricultural world is going. So anyway, I know Wally feels the same way about his interaction with this also. So anyway, today we're going to have a little bit of chat on inventory and why that is so important for what John and his team do for each of you. And please don't hesitate to, if we got questions as we go, we'll slow down, or not slow down, but we'll try to take those as we go. And, this is not a deal where we're going to, answer questions at the end. Okay. So is that okay, John?
That's perfect. We will also take questions at the end if you still have them, but we'd really like them in the middle. And I just want to point out that Wally Olson, the main inventory violator, is here. So we were teasing you before you got on, Wally, about this presentation is for you.
That is fine. All I can say is that, in my humble opinion, I just was not educated, and so here I am, humbling myself up.
55 years in, and we're going to start explaining it. How about that?
That's all right.
Better late than never.
Yeah. And I think this is just an accounting thing myself, humbly, so no, I'm just kidding.
Well, okay, let's go there just a minute, Wallace. Okay, is Jordan on there too? Or did Jordan venture away? But anyway, there's this whole deal about, it really, that coming back to hope. I guess, I'm actually working toward, those Wildcats that are at K-State. They just need help. I think it's the issue, isn't it, John?
Now you're going to open a whole different can of worms. You want to
I
fight
will-
about inventory and college basketball at the same time, Walter? You are brave. You live a long way away.
No, we're talking about education and not basketball.
Yeah, that's that you're spot on today, Wallace. Okay.
Yep. No, I appreciate you realizing that, my friend. So
I know. You know, when I
Don't
figured
suck
that
up, Wally. It's not going to get you anywhere.
yeah, no, don't worry.
Yeah. So, okay, what I want to chat with, you know, I've kind of got three little deals here today. One is, why is inventory so important? You know, for you know, why is it so important? You know, in your financials, you know, in your financials, and you know, I want to talk about maybe some definitional pieces of inventory and the components that we see, just to kind of maybe clarify them. And then also I'm going to talk about valuation. So that's really the three components that I want to lay out for you today. Okay. Does that sound okay, John?
Sounds great.
Okay. I mean, it really, I mean, is Daniel on today, John?
I believe he is. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I mean, one of the things that's really pretty special is John and his team want to make sure that we have for your monthly financials, or however often that they're being done, they want you know, accurate inventories from you. But anyway, I want to go through. Sometimes we need to understand the why we do things. Okay. You know, because, you know, there are, you know, sometimes it takes people, you know, that maybe go to Manhattan, Kansas to school. It takes them a little while to figure things out, right, John?
Yes, hopefully. Hopefully it's long, not just never.
Right. Okay. So what, I mean, what is this inventory impact? Okay. I mean, you know, we've had some, you know, so, I mean, some of you have been on some of our prior webinars, but you know, we've talked about, you know, working capital and liquidity. I mean, you know, that part that's the market livestock, that's a piece of, you know, the liquidity or working capital when we look at the balance sheet that John and his team, you know, put out. And I mean, another piece of this is that if, you know, some of you have been through, you know, Bud Williams's courses and Wally's courses, you know, there's the piece about, you know, what's the right number for cash and what's the right number for inventory and what's the right number for our graph. So, but anyway, you know, we're talking here, you know, say the primarily the animals or the feed or you know, when we go through this. So I mean we want that number correct when John and the team ask for it, because the piece that I think that we really want to focus on as we go through, you know, the inventories are part of our asset turnover. Well, you know, there's an equation where turnover times profit margin gives us an ROA. And I mean, we've been looking at some of the ROAs that you know, that are popping up on some of the statements that John and the team do, and I mean, there's some really special numbers out there. So God bless your commitment to understanding and what you're doing, et cetera. And then sometime, I mean, the banker, when you're sitting across the desk from him, you know, he likes to see that working capital grow, and maybe they're going to do something on, you know, the financing, et cetera. So those inventories impact, you know, your financing or you know, what you can maybe borrow against, et cetera. Okay. But we also, you know, I always like the Gordon Gordon Hazard model is that, you know, when it came to say livestock inventories, you know, and he and his son Mark, who was a banker and et cetera, they wanted you to ultimately own that inventory, and you know, and maybe you know, you kind of each has their own context and goals, but they wanted you know, what Gordon wanted to, his vision when he chatted. I mean, he's an old time stocker trader. I mean, older than Wally. Okay, that was in Mississippi, and he was kind of a godfather, all of it. But he wanted you to own those animals and not have any financing on it, especially maybe after a 5-year period of time. So I wanted to go through this why just a minute here before we get into you know, a little bit more on, you know, inventory. Have we got
Hang on, Walter. I want to clarify for a minute. Hazards deal. He wanted you, if you were a stocker operator, he wanted you after 5 years to not have to use an operating line of credit, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is that the way you remembered it, Wallace?
Yes, and you know what he wanted you to do is get the first load paid for, and then you grow the then you can finance another load, but you got to always have, you know, and then you just keep growing. And
Yep.
Right. So, okay. Is there any other questions there? And so when John and Daniel and Jordan, when they request those inventories, these are the things that it's impacting when you give them those numbers. I just want you to understand the importance of why they do that, and they want them real. I mean, sometimes there's some, you know, cutoff issues, you know, where you know, maybe something's been shipped at the end of the month, and we need to make sure that that's either in inventory, even though you haven't sold it. Okay. Okay. So now let's just go through some of the. I'm going to close this just a second. Okay, that'll work. Okay. Okay. Now, John, can you see this? Okay.
Yes. Can everybody else see it? Ricky, can you see that? You're in the car probably, huh?
We okay?
I can see it, you guys.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thanks,
good,
Tina.
good. And I mean, I'm going to call this maybe a textbook definition of inventory in dictionary.com. A complete listing of merchandise or stock on hand, work in process, raw materials, finished goods on hand, made each year by a business concern. That's a textbook definition. But I mean, what John is working with you guys is that you're doing a monthly or quarterly inventory, depending on how often he does it. So, but that's a textbook definition of inventory, just to get our mindset correct. Okay. So now let's take a look at what we see on a typical ranch. Okay. You know, there'll be some livestock inventory. There's probably some feed inventory. And if they have a weakness toward crops, maybe like somebody in Kansas, not all in Kansas, but anyway, there may be some crop inventory. Okay. So, okay. Now let's chat a little bit about the livestock piece of this. Okay. So we'll go down the cattle piece first. Okay. We got any shepherds on here today, John?
I believe we do. I won't
Okay.
out any of them, but
Okay. All right. So, I mean, what we're really doing is, I mean, we've got livestock, and I've tried to keep this to, cattle and sheep right now. Well, you can say big ruminant and little ruminant, or whatever you want to say. But generally, the cattle will be broken down into, maybe a breeding herd and some market livestock. So, have cows, bulls, calves, H1, H2, if we're growing heifers. And then, on the cows, we maybe try to group them by age, and we'll also probably be breaking that inventory down by keeping track of something for raised and purchased. Now, why would we want to make that distinction on the raised and purchased?
Somebody said it.
Did somebody say that word?
Taxes.
Oh my goodness. All right. So that is correct, because the raised are, we get cap gain on those. So that's a big deal.
We can get cap gain on the capital gain on the purchase too, correct?
Well, if it's over above the original cost.
Yes. Yeah, you got to recapture the original cost.
Right. Correct.
We plan on that, Walter, just so you know. So
Right. Okay. So, but we have the different classes there, and then of course on the calves, you're going to have steers or heifers. So also, okay. The market side, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are doing stockers, and maybe they're doing a little bit of finishing or fats, etc. But generally, most of what we're seeing, with you guys is that there's stockers involved here. Okay, is that kind of the summarize maybe the cattle side there, John? Is there anything you would add?
no, I think that's great.
May I add something? Since
Yeah, go right ahead, Wally.
I'm the villainous on my inventory. When you're doing this, do as I say, not as I do, please, because I've got a track record with this. And since I do lots of deals, you need to make sure. And I'll give you an example. We grazed some cattle in Florida, and this last year, and there was some that were sold there. Well, the gentleman just took, I don't know, 10 or 11 that he got the income for. He just took it off the feed bill, and so needless to say, they were on inventory. And now we are, as usual, short on the inventory is off. And since my memory is about 30 seconds, it took a while to dig down through that. So when you're dealing with inventory, if you sell something, you have a check written for it. Agreed. I mean, you need to have, that is where I get myself into trouble. And I also put cattle out with some people that can't count sometimes too, but that's a side note. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm going to call these war stories, but I mean, there's some wisdom there that Wally is sharing. So, I mean, there's pieces of this depending on how your enterprises are set up and where you have your locations, keeping track of that inventory is where John and his team spend a lot of time making sure that that's straight in the process. And so Wally raises a very, very good point. Okay. John,
Can I throw something else in here, Walter? I think that the point that Wally makes is an excellent one. This is not easy. And one of the things he mentioned is I should say, it's not easy for most of us. It's not actually that complicated. It's the matter of getting it done, right? Which often doesn't happen. And what Wally's talking about is, it is hard to go back when you and Wally and I meet in November and remember what happened in February and March and April when there was lots of turnover and lots of action, and it was, 6 or 8 months ago. I will add that, the well-run ranches that I have, worked for or been involved with in one way or another are all pretty anal about inventory. There's a tremendous amount of value tied up in inventory, and not having it just sort of filter away slowly over time is a very, very important part of the job. We'll talk about that more, I think, as we go forward in the future or later here. But I have friends who, for example, they keep track of inventory on a weekly basis. Ryan Brand, who some of you know, is a good friend of mine, and Wally's and Walter's, and his guys all do inventory weekly. Their situation is a little different than, let's say, 100,000 acre, Wyoming ranch, as far as being able to see stuff and count them, where they're a little smaller. But the emphasis on preserving that and frankly, managing that value is very, very important. And I don't want anybody to miss that. I use the example all the time of when we have big changes in our inventory value, like we had in, 15, 16, and like we may be experiencing now, those values can actually dwarf our actual cash flow. And so when we are managing those correctly, we have the opportunity to add huge profit in our business and to prevent huge loss.
Right. And another piece of that is, I'm gonna go maybe a little bit in the prospective end, John.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we do the stock flows and the different classes of livestock, and when we sell them, and when we're preparing for how that next year is going to look like, I mean, those are all key things that we need to be, that's our monitoring process. And so anyway, that's a very, very special part of our inventory management. I mean, there's a piece of it, this inventory management. I mean, it's a big managerial piece. I mean, if you got, just say you had a John Deere parts dealership. I mean, they're watching their parts, and why can't we do the same thing with our livestock inventory? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So then on our sheep, we're probably we're keeping the ewes, the rams, the market lambs, and the replacement ewes. I mean, we don't have as many different moving targets as we do with the larger animal there. Okay. So is there anything you want to add on that one, John?
Well, I would, and we've been working with a couple of folks developing, and I think, Wally, you've been part of that discussion, right? Developing a sheep bell curve, just like the cow bell curve, that kind of demonstrates what markets are telling us about the value of different age classes.
And you can run sheep stalker business. I mean, you can have as many, since sheep reproduce, you can have as many opportunities there as you do in cattle. I mean, you just drop down,
It just turns a lot faster and often requires less total dollars.
Right. So when we look back up here at this deal on asset turnover, that's what Wally and John are trying to get us to think about. When we have that when we have the sheep involved in the operation. So the goal is sometimes I think of course, quote, our neighbors, that they get hung up on what they want the pretty cattle, but maybe the sheep are a better alternative. Okay. Feed. I mean, John may not go quite this. John and the team may not go quite this detail. But I mean, that your cookbooks could be set up, that you'd have your general feed account. Then maybe, you're buying in hay, so maybe that's your roughage or straw bales or whatever that you're gonna have. Maybe there's some protein, that you're doing, in your cow herd or whatever, and then maybe, so that maybe be some lick tubs. I mean, if you went out and bought a bunch of lick tubs at the end of the year, those should probably be on your 1231 balance sheet. And then some, depending on the logistics, maybe using DDGs as part of their their ration that's coming, through their overhead. They get delivered or put it on concrete or whatever. So anyway, this is just, I mean, each of you may have a little bit different context, but this is one that I wanted to throw out there for you to think about. So would you have anything to add to that one, John?
Yeah, one we've been talking about, getting questions about is, what about standing feed on pasture? Super easy to inventory hay bales in a barn. Often as valuable or more as grass out in the pasture. Give me your thoughts on that.
Oh, to me, all you're doing is, I'm probably a little conservative on that. I don't know if I would mess with it. Okay, it may be, you may keep track of it, you're with me, but I don't know if I'd put it on a balance sheet, because the banker's not gonna, that's something the banker's not gonna probably, he can't really get his teeth into that one.
Right. And that one of the reasons it's come up is because there are a few bankers that are willing to at least talk about it.
Wow, that's a big deal if they will.
I agree. And recognizing the value of that, and I think of windrows also, right? When we convert from haying to grazing windrows, sometimes owners will have a hard time because, again, you can't go count the bales in the stack. Well, how much feed do you have? Well, we think we got about 2 tons per acre, but it's laying on the ground instead of laying in the barn.
Right.
It may be a slightly lower, or standing feed also, maybe a slightly lower nutritional content, that sort of thing, but the harvest efficiency is a lot higher. There's the risk of it burning, but there's always the risk of that in a haystack. There's a risk of weather damage and snow cover, ice cover, that sort of thing. But again, we kind of have that with other feed sources too. So that's a discussion I'd like to push a little further along as we go. But again, there are bankers out there that will at least consider it. And I don't want to out anybody. Tyler, didn't you say your banker will at least consider that?
Yeah, he will.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, go ahead, Wally.
One thing I think, I don't know whether you put it on the balance sheet, but you need to have a feed inventory.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
And to be right honest with you, if you don't have some type of planned grazing, in my humble opinion, you don't have any, you
Right.
don't, I mean, if you're just continuous stocking, you have no clue how much you have out there, in my humble opinion. So.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But if you are in a planned grazing system, you often have a pretty good idea of how fast you're going through things, and
Yep.
and whether or not it's working according to plan, that sort of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, another one that's out there, depending on the latitude. I mean, I went to no-till on the plains, and there was a guy from not from Oklahoma, I mean, okay, but this guy from Missouri, he was doing a short season Milo that he was putting in after a small grain.
Right.
And so, I mean, there was no red or green paint that was actually harvesting that Milo. It was all being done by the animal.
Yeah.
So you talk about a low operational deal. I mean, those are the ones that just ring my heart.
Right. Right. And one of the things that's made me think about this a lot more, Walter, has been the idea that we know that grazing, I will not say always, but is very frequently the most, the most profitable way to go as compared to, for example, feeding. And so accounting for that value in our financials so that it parallels what we know operationally is where it's kind of really rung my bell that we need to be thinking about that more.
Right.
And also, one thing is if you're ever going to create value, with your banker, you've got to start and get a track record. And it's just the same way with trying to sell carbon credits. How are you going to measure it? And you need to start and do it.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Oh, okay. And then another one, depending on the operation is, maybe, if there's a tendency for some row crop ag out there, there's, grain, hay and silage perhaps that, is coming off the crop side of, the operation. And then, we'll get into, are we gonna, run it through the animals? So then we need to, inventory that, and then move it, over to the, the respective enterprise as we use it.
Yep.
Okay.
And any questions about this before we go on? What do we need to flesh out more here as you guys are thinking about this in your own operation?
Yeah, we need there's some input there or some questions. This is a great time to bring it forward.
Well, since I'm the greatest center on inventory that's ever walked the face of the earth, so I will give you my 2 cents.
Not the greatest. You're just the greatest that works with Walter.
Yeah, well, and I humbly beg that I usually have my inventory. It just doesn't satisfy an accountant. That's, there's 2 different.
That's the truth of the matter right there.
Yeah, but here is another thing. I'm talking about doing stuff with other people. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's been brought out to me, what I need to do is be very, very aware, just like this, the set of Florida cattle. You understand what I'm trying to say? I realize I had the information to know that some cattle had been, in theory, traded there. They sold them, they kept the money, but they took it off the feed bill,
Yeah.
And one thing I don't like about it, because it misrepresents the feed bill and a number of things, correct, John Haskell? Because
That's right.
To unwind that is about impossible.
Right.
But also, if you think
impossible.
you're going to get people to do that, you really have to work at it. And,
Yeah. Well, part of it is, I'm going to say, Wally, is you have to set it up on the front end on, like John was talking about with the weekly inventories. I know that sounds, real detailed, in the process, but the frequency of inventories, I'm going to say probably mitigates that issue is where I'm going with that.
Yep, I'll agree with you.
Yeah.
Because it's more likely I'm going to remember what I did on Tuesday than it is last year in July.
Right. Yeah.
And there's another part of this, and I think, Wally, we've had this discussion. I've had this discussion with a number of you. When you are dealing with a supplier that says, well, why do we need to do that? You can say, well, you know what? I've got this guy that we work with, and he's kind of an a-hole, and this is what he insists we do. So just blame us for the problem and roll on. Most people will accept that.
Right.
We have a guy that does our accounting, and he's kind of a jerk. Like, that is not a sentence that is foreign to most people.
Correct. I would agree with that.
And if
So-
you have John Haskell's name, they're in complete agreement. That you
Yeah,
are doing
that'll get you a lot further down the road. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Boy,
Well, another
let's get
piece.
back to seriousness.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, what I'm getting at, I think that is well taken is, sometimes to get a point across, I mean, and John is accepting that, it's okay to actually say, well, that's something my accountant needs to know. So, I mean, John will, I think, gladly take that responsibility on to improve the quality of what your financial information is.
Even better if they want to call and argue about
Right.
it. Anyway, we've talked about that enough.
Okay, now let's go to another piece of this. Okay. All right. Let's talk about there's probably a couple other ways to do this too, but anyway, I'm going to use in the livestock part of this. There's really three different ways that we typically see. Okay, and one of them is I'm gonna call it the cost model. Okay, so if we buy 100 stocker calves at $1,000 a pop, that's $100,000. Okay. And if it was one purchase and we have 50 of them on hand at the end of the year, then we value them at $50,000. Okay, because we're primarily maybe using a first in, first out, and you're trying to keep track of. I mean, that's something that you keep track of when you're trying to figure out how it's going to flow, perhaps on the Schedule F of your tax return. Okay, so that's kind of that's kind of, I'm gonna say, alternative number one. Okay,
And this really is tax.
that is correct, and most of the time it's on a first in, first out basis.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Now I'm going to go to this third one first to make a point. And where I'm going with that, I mean, we're still going to keep track of our classes of critters. Okay. All right.
And how far are you breaking the classes down?
Well, I'm going to say, I'm talking cows, bulls, H2s, H1s, etc. You with me, Wally?
Okay, because see, one of the big burrs that I have is that, when you're doing classes, you need to do it by age because of the huge difference in value that there is.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Okay. But what I'm trying to get at is, John, how many on here have gone to RFP?
I would say the vast percentage. I would be curious who hasn't. Trying to think, looking at the list of people. Mimi, you have not been. Tyson, have you been?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else not been? I think everybody else has.
Right. So, I mean, John, once what I call it the base value, base cost value. You with me?
Yeah.
Is what they're doing.
Yep.
I mean, and so an age cow on an RFP balance sheet is going to be out there. They're probably going to be 1,250 to 1,500. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. All right. And they keep that pretty consistent, right, John?
Yeah. They literally keep it the same, in and out.
Right. And I mean, understand that. They're really putting the same value on the beginning and the ending inventory. So really what they're looking at is, what happens to the units, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay. So do we understand, is anybody that has any questions on that?
Well, the big thing is by doing that, you're only get value from production.
Right. Right. That's exactly right, Wally. Right. Right.
But let's put this in context just a little bit. One of the things they are trying to avoid is various forms of, inflating the numbers by optimistic future telling, right? And the other is they are staying very focused on management. And now this is again where we diverge in philosophy. We know that, we are very close to RFP as both an organization and as a program. This is one of the places where we diverge. And the biggest thing is they originally, and this is kind of a Stan Parsons thing, is you didn't impact the market. And so you just sort of left it out. And I think what we have come to really understand since that time is that actually, no, you have a great deal of impact on the marketing. And so while you can't necessarily affect the market gives you lots of opportunities. If you choose not to capitalize on those, that's kind of your own fault. But when we have the information that we need and we capitalize on the market gives us a lot of opportunity to make a lot more money than what just comes from production.
Yeah, very well said, John. I appreciate you sharing that, because that is the weakness of this, I'm going to call it this base cost value system. I mean, and some of you may be on, maybe you were on, say, the Kansas, K-State's record keeping, and that's a lot of well, every year, I mean, like in Illinois, the Farm Business Farm Management, they come out with what the base values are going to be. I mean, they do tweak them a little bit, but those record keeping systems, that's a way that they try to do something that would be close to what Ranching for Profit was doing. Okay.
And again, this is a place where we don't, there's not a lot of separation between us and Ranching for Profit. This is a pretty big one. But this is a place where Ranching for Profit, in my mind, and the land grants and the IRS are all kind of lined up together in a very strange way. And I think we agree that model is wrong, right? If you take an average value across all those cows, just like Wally's saying, we should be dividing them out into age classes, because there is a huge difference among those values, and an average does not give us a very good representation across the whole herd.
Well, and another one on that is, depending on when you're buying in, John, you with me?
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, you may be buying in it. I mean, there may be a reason locally or the market or whatever. You may be buying in at, I'm just picking a number, say $1,950. Okay.
Yep.
And you're going to value that animal at $1,250. You've got $700 that's going to flop through there, and the way the system, the way the system is, they don't. You're not really probably tracking what that really is in the deal. I mean, it's really a $700 depreciation, but that may not be the right number. So
that's right. Hang on a second. I think, Ty, did you raise your hand on purpose? I think we've got a question there.
No, I was just clapping my hands. I agreed.
Okay, all right. I see. Very good. And see, one thing that by doing it the way everybody does it is that you miss out on the appreciation and the depreciation. I mean, you allow the one of the most important profit centers just to get withered away because nobody tracks it. That's the way I look at it.
Yep, that's right, Wally. Okay, now let's go into the, let's go into a different pool, okay? I'm gonna call this maybe the deep end of the pool. Would that be a way to say this, John?
Yes, I think that's a very good way.
Okay, all right. So what we're really doing here is those different classes and ages that Wally was talking about, classes, ages, and weights. We're gonna get into the soup a little bit about that. And we're going to value it at MARKET, market. And we may soften that a little bit, maybe by some marketing costs or whatever. But anyway, it's really technically whatever Oklahoma City stockers are that are 600 weight, less the trucking from Claremore to get them there would be technically the way to do it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now let's talk about why we do that. Okay. Now, okay, please forgive me, Wally, but I made this the comment in this very first one here. I said it accommodates the Bud Williams sell by. Okay, because Bud always said that we are selling animals every day. Okay,
Or you're buying animals every day.
that's correct. All right, but if we got an inventory, we want to value them at market every day. So that's the same thing as selling them. Would you agree with that, Wally?
I'd agree with that.
Okay, John, you have,
But if you keep them,
You bought
then
them.
you bought them at that.
That's exactly right.
right, right. Because, I mean, a piece that, now Wally, have you ever gotten a commodity account statement from a brokerage firm?
Yes, I have gotten yes.
Okay, and how do they value that put that you have on that commodity account statement?
Well, it's by the market and stuff. That's how they
That's what
value
we're-
it. Put, correct?
That's correct.
But I'm also not smart enough to deal in puts and calls, so.
Okay, but anyway, that's the theory. So I mean, we're valuing our livestock inventory the very same way as what we're trying to do. Okay, so what we're also looking at is, you know, when Wally talked about you know, the different classes and ages, we're also looking at that inventory in a very detailed way. So to figure out, you know, what is overvalued and what we should be maybe thinking about selling. Okay. Does that resonate, John?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
One thing I will say that you know, when you do this, you got to be mentally prepared. And I'll give you an example. On one set of cows that I have, we had a very high open rate. And with the cost, it is not worth trying to rebreed them. So we just sold them. And so cows that were valued, you know, at $1,200, you know, now all of a sudden became $900 cows. And you need to mentally, you know, that is, you know, you just need to understand what you're doing there and what can happen and stuff.
Right. Okay. So what I'm trying to point at is why I put that. This is the real numbers. So, I mean, that is, I mean, when we're doing it at market, those are the real numbers that we expect that we can get out of the animals that we're trying to put a value on. And it's different than the cost. And it's different than the base cost. So we're trying, this is what, the real turnover numbers will be based off of, et cetera, when we're doing this. Now, Wally's been sharing some war stories, and I'm going to share with the group today a war story that I recently heard. And John and I were talking about this the other day. There was a commodity group here in Central Illinois. They were trying to help, say, primarily the grain producers. They wanted to have something that would approximate their break evens. And one of the guys in my office and I, we were involved in helping them work through that with some of their clients. Well, ultimately they built somewhat of a practice like John has with his team, and they were doing the outsourced accounting and CFO type work that John and the team are doing. But anyway, there's some of the people, I mean, there was some, I don't know, drama, with that firm, et cetera. And anyway, some of the talent, went and started their own business, et cetera. Well, two of the people that were on the accounting side, I do a little bit of coaching with them, like I do with John and his team. Well, they call this Mike and Jamie called me the other day, and here's the war story I'm going to go through. There's a business that's in Southern Illinois. They have a source that they get the cattle through. Okay, I mean, they're buying locally. Okay. What they're doing is they aggregate them, maybe get them straightened out, and they send them, to, two other states, Kansas and Nebraska. But what's going on? They're doing all their inventory off of cost. Okay, that's all they do is they do it off of cost, and then they're trying to add whatever the feed costs are of the month, for the month. They're trying to bump it up by that number and all that. I mean, lots of valuation in the deal. I mean, they got the numbers, okay. So I mean, big picture, if we go back to this piece right here, I mean, and when they're sending the critters to Kansas or Nebraska, they're going to be finished, and they're going to sell them as 1,450 pound fats. Okay, what's this say right? What's this one say right here, John?
I identify overvalued and sell them.
That's correct. Is there a weak link in their model?
They never get out other than right at the end.
Yeah,
that isn't always the most overvalued time.
correct. The other piece was they'd had some I don't know, they kind of got in the middle. I mean, they were in transition of getting it from another account in which there'd been a bust in the inventory, and they were trying to clean that up over time. Well, I think there's a little bit of it. I coached them. I said, go ahead and take the Band-Aid off. Go ahead and rip it off and get this inventory valued in a proper way. And so what I recommended to them, and Wally hasn't sent me the check yet, okay, because they haven't signed up. I'm being a little bit flippant, but anyway, I recommended that they go to either Wally's course, or to, Bud Williams's course, and actually, get some real world experience on how, the inventory should be valued, because all they were really, they weren't doing this bit of, selling the overvalued and in the process. So anyway, that one just popped up with a little bit of a war story here in the last, kind of the last week. So Wally, you have anything you want to add to that one?
Well, yeah, one thing, the thing where the biggest problems with computer programs that came out of the universities is they have a start point and they have an end point, and then you go, but there is no place in them where they say, okay, we went from this point to this point, and the market is telling us at the middle point, it's time to sell them, because the market is not willing to give you anything. You understand what I'm trying to say? And if you look at most stalker deals, most of the money is made in the first 200 pounds of gain. And then if you break even on the next 200 pounds of gain, you're lucky, or if not, lose money.
Right.
So you got to look within, I call it within the deal and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, but anyway.
Here's a jab at you, and if you do that good enough, you don't need to worry about your damn inventory. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
Just look at the stack of money, Walter. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So,
We're ripping
Right,
scabs off here, everybody.
Yeah, but let's go to some real world examples, right? Because there are times when we see people who during drought, for example, have to destock, or an absentee landowner sees boy, the cash is really rolling in this place. This guy must be doing great. Well, what's really happening is you're selling the factory, right? And then the converse can happen after the drought, right? When you are restocking, right? You are adding heifers back into the program to replace cows sold. Well, now your cash flow doesn't look very good, but you're kind of doing what you need to do to get your feet back under you. So yes, look at the stack of money. That's important. But if you're generating a stack of money and you're selling off the factory, you might be hurting your own future. Right.
So, I'm gonna close this out, John. Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing to remember too is like where we're at right now in the market. Unless you just have a never-ending line of credit, you're going to be operating on, I don't know, 2/3 of the inventory that you could buy last year. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? I mean, they went up so much that,
Oh,
Well, there's still a lot of undervalued stuff out there. Anybody who wants to calve when, it's warm and green grass can get some pretty good deals.
oh,
Yep.
yeah, cows. I will not argue, George. Cows are, what I was, since it's near, very close to what I've just done is, last year we bought $700 and $800 stalkers, and this year they're $1,300. That's what, my last deal is the one that's really on my mind, so.
right.
Yeah, we're trying to move some right now and we can't get them because it keeps snowing. They cancel all the sales.
There are some logistical problems right now. That is true.
Maybe you should move.
Yeah. Right. So, do we have any questions today? Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, Walter, could you talk a little bit about weighted average cost of inventory valuation?
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, maybe I'll just kind of give you the reason why I want to know. We're doing sell by in an extremely small way. Onesies and twosies. Like we're not working in low lots or pots of cattle. So for example, if we buy a pair, bring it back to the ranch, immediately wean them because the calf was huge, right? We don't view it as a pair. Now it's a cull cow and a stalker. And then when we sell that back into the market, that stalker is now in a ring with a whole bunch of other stalkers. And the way our auction works is there's no way to verify what animal is in the ring, right? It's very, very messy. And so we were having a very hard time matching revenue to our costs and offsetting the inventory. So we're using a weighted average cost method using the classical accounting, inventory, and sales table. I thought this would really impress John and his team, but he's like, no, you're overthinking it. We just do inventory based on market value. And I get that, I appreciate that, but that still doesn't really help me in my individual animals and not having complete control. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the, and then John and I are probably in the same camp there, Eric, okay, is that we look at it in the aggregate, in the process. Because, I mean, where I guess I'm coming from is that, you know, that animal, what you're doing is that when you take it from the calf, okay, Eric, you with me? You really sold that. I mean, there's a couple ways you can look at it. You know, is that a reduction in that cow? Okay, because I don't know. Are you doing a deal where are you going to grind the cow, or what are you doing with the cow?
Well, a whole bunch of anything, but this isn't like a cow calf. Like we're not buying pairs. Like that is what we are buying. But
Right.
in our situation, it's an unweaned, extremely heavy calf. So as soon as it comes back to our yard, we wean him, and then that calf gets mixed in with all the rest. So it's just difficult to figure out if that sale actually made any money or if that strategy, right? Same thing with stags. Like we bought a bunch of stags and cut their nuts off, and then they go in the ring a few months later with a whole bunch of other calves, and it just all gets mixed up. So we just run a weighted average. So we have, and that's how we relieve our inventory. And that's what gets linked up on the sales side. Right. I made $1,000 off of this stag, and then I deduct the weighted average cost of goods sold.
Right.
But hey, if you haven't seen this, or if you're, then that's a good sign that I'm wasting my efforts barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, I mean, because big picture, what we're really doing is, you know, when that, yeah, I mean, you bought that stag at a discount. You with me? All
Yeah.
right, all right. Well, then when you turn your inventory into John, and it's whatever 45 days later, you've really kind of marked him up, even though you haven't sold him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, once he kind of gets that, because I mean it's kind of what Wally was talking about, is in that first, you know, you're basically selling your expertise, you know, and then in ones and twosies are okay, you know, in what you're doing. So, you know, you're not trying to beat you up. I don't want you to think we're beating you up.
No,
I don't want you to think that we're not impressed. It's just not helpful.
Right.
No, my wife is not impressed either with the amount of time I put in these stupid spreadsheets trying to solve a problem that's not really a problem. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see how it works. Like I still don't understand how this market valuation technique works on QuickBooks. when you relieve that inventory, like cost of goods sold, linking it with the revenue. But I trust John and his team, and I trust the process. I'm just very curious to see how it works.
Yeah, and probably the biggest thing I think is you are thinking of it very much like a tax approach, right? First in, first out. Each animal has a value. We actually, I know a guy who they bought a lot of cattle and they tracked the individual price, purchase and sale of every individual calf. And they wanted, they had some very specific reasons for doing that. What's interesting is he did it that way and we did it our way, and we came up at the end with exactly the same number. The interesting thing to me about sell by is that we often deal with averages of groups when we're looking at trends and that sort of thing. But it is the individuals that actually move the needle. So,
Right.
but it's the individuals when they are aggregated that move the needle, right? So you choose to sell this animal or that animal, but it's the overall approach that gives you sort of the total. So it doesn't really matter if I made $80 a head on this one and $85 on this other one. What matters is in the application of the strategy that we're driving that thing forward the whole time. Is that
Got
an
it.
accurate assessment, Walter?
Yeah, you're saying it right. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, remember our mark to market, as Walter describes it. I often, whenever that term comes up, I always joke about, but not in the Enron sense. And if you're familiar with Enron and their accounting practices, their deal was, they would do this quote unquote mark to market, which was a complete misapplication of the principle, right? They would call liabilities assets. It was a very complicated thing. But the important thing is when you subtract things from inventory, Eric, when we revalue the inventory, we're not doing it as on an individual basis, right? We are doing it as an aggregated group.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Because
so-
at the end of the day, it's based on like the inventory. When I log into QuickBooks, the figure
Yeah.
that's there, it's dollars.
Correct. Ultimately,
It's the aggregate pool of dollars, not
Right.
individual heads or not number of classes or whatever.
And if the market goes up by 25 cents a pound, we add the 25 cents a pound. And I don't want this to sound inappropriate, but it kind of comes out of the air.
Right.
Okay. It is the way we do it. It is just that 25 cents a pound can just be added to the inventory.
And that's precisely the reason why, like bringing back the conversation with the trading account, Ranch for Profit style, that's precisely the reason why they use the same number going in and out. It's because they're trying to isolate the true
Correct.
value creation from management expertise, not external variables. But I think there's a way where you can have your cake and eat it too. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the way that we've set up our books.
Yep.
Right, is we've got the management side that's trying to capture the value of the actual management with its own inventory ins and outs.
Yep.
Which is going to be the same. And then we have the livestock asset class, which is trying to capture the fluctuations of value due to the market.
Right.
We'll see if this works, but
I mean, the piece I would say, Eric, is you might want to think about I mean, you might want to think about the time required to get all that data versus what the end result is, and because I'm just picking an example. If you might be able to. I mean, here's one that John and I know about recently. This was a January cattle deal, and there were. I know this is more numbers than what you're doing, okay? But there were 87 head came through a ring, okay? You could not physically get in the ring with the critters because they were that wild. Got it? So what happened was when they got those steers and heifers home, 2 days they had them gentled down. I mean, what would have Bud Williams have done, the next week on that one, John?
Probably taking them right back.
Right, or maybe to a different yard, but a different sale barn too, but
Or sold them off the place, but they would have been gentle as puppies, right?
that's correct, yeah. So I mean, what we're getting at is that value, I mean, let's, I don't know what Wally, he's still here, or did he get off?
No, I'm still here,
Yeah,
working on my inventory.
Oh, you're working on your inventory? What would have been, I mean, in January, what do you think, that 2 days of time would have been worth?
Oh, it could have been, on 87 head, it could have been easily worth $100 a head or $8,700.
Yeah, you see what we're getting at, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not trying to, I just wanted you to think, think about that aggregate piece a little bit more. And then, another piece that I think that we've been doing, and when we get into value of gain, were you on the one we did on value of gain? Were you on that one?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, John, when that might be one that he might want to go back to, and if you need a little coaching on that, I think John and I can, get back to you on that a little bit too. Because what we were doing, instead of doing just the straight up cattle square, you with me?
Yeah.
Okay, what we were doing was we were actually breaking the marketing piece out from the production piece. That's where we're going. That's something that you might want to think about in your spreadsheets of thinking about getting to that point, because that's a big deal.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Not across our whole business.
Right.
Separating those two value streams is very, very important for our situation.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely look at that.
Yeah, but anyway, we can help you on that because we want you to understand that. Okay, because that's one piece that we look at it in aggregate, but we don't bust it out. Okay.
Which reminds me, Walter, I think you owe me an Excel tool. Is that right?
I probably do. I'll make a note.
Very good. I'll just tell you, Eric, on the example I gave where they were tracking individual animal performance, they were doing that on a couple $1 million worth of inventory. We can do our system in minutes. His, I promise you, took hours and hours and hours. And again, we got to the same result at the end. Now they had some other things they were trying to do with that added additional value to it. But if you ask us to do that for you, it's a significant change in the task. And again, we got to the same answer at the end on the financial side. So this is a place where adding that level of simplicity makes it really effective. Because it's fast, because it's easy, because it gets done. Right.
Right.
Okay. That's that's a good question, Eric, and hopefully we've maybe given you some clarification on that.
Well, maybe not now, but I'll sleep on it and it will sink in and I'll get confused and I will run around in circles, but eventually it will sink in.
I
Thank
guess
you.
I didn't understand. Are we not able to see what class they are on the sales ticket for Eric? Or
So what was that, Daniel?
I was just trying to understand the issue with your sale where you sell at, and or you're not able to label the animals to the right class on the sale ticket or something, or is it?
Yeah, that's right. As soon as our animals get to the sale barn, we lose complete control what ring they go in. And because all our cattle, every single one is a beautiful, fancy black cow, it's hard to keep track of the critters. You know, and so the weighted average cost method is just another method when you have a bunch of widgets coming in and a bunch of widgets going out, constant outflow and inflow. It's just a way to average it out. And in the grand scheme of things, John is right. It will come to the exact number he comes up with.
Yeah, but Eric, if you sell those at a sale barn, I mean, you get your sale barn receipt and you know, I mean, it's not an average of, you know, there's different classes that sell for different prices, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I guess the reason why it was important for us for this year is because really we ran 20 different little micro experiments, and we were never really to isolate the variables enough to actually determine if the experiments worked. Like, we were running all these different experiments, all these different enterprise experiments, and at the end, they just got all kind of mixed up at the end. So overall, business level, we can tell if it worked or not, and it did, but we're not able to get the fidelity of, okay, did this experiment work? Did that experiment work? Because at the end of the day, it was just all smashed together in the sale ring. But I'm over it. I'm not much of a scientist anyways.
Let me give you another one, and this is a personal bias, and I think Wally, Walter, and I all share this bias. I am, for example, not a seed stock person, and I have a terrible bias against labeling individuals, etc. I think in general in our industry, we spend a tremendous amount of time and effort and money, and I think most of it is wasted by trying to track individual animals. I'm a huge fan of grouping those, and you can do that multiple ways. You can do it by cohort, you can do it by, you know, class, you can do it by all kinds of ways. But, you know, having spent time trying at 40 below zero to get an EID to read, you know, before loading trucks, and, you know, I mean, there's so many problems and things that happen, you know, individually marking cows and calves and all that stuff. You know, look, you got a cow with a bad bag. If you want to mark her and ship her, that's fine. Otherwise, ship the cow with the bad bag. You don't have to write her tag number down. She's got a bad bag. Look at her. If she's got a poor calf, you know, same thing, mark her. But if, you know, trying to chase too much with individual ID, I think just, I don't know, it takes so much time and effort. And then most of it is actually never used. And so that bias comes in a little, I think, here, because then we think, oh, you got this many 400-pound calves. Great, we're in it. You got this many 5-year-old cows. Fantastic. I don't particularly, and this sounds like I don't like cows. It's quite the opposite. I love cows. But the fact that, you know, Jane and, you know, Daisy are different individuals is great. I'm all about that, but I don't chase that data.
I know for myself, you know, growing up, that's when performance testing was just coming out, and I had one neighbor and we weighed his calves every year judiciously. I mean, and
Individually
and weighed the cows so we could get percentage of production, you know. But old Faggy, he'd, you know, like he said, at the end of the day, he said, by the time you sold the, you know, the olds, the bad bags, the wild ones and stuff, you know, he never did use any of that performance data. And I know one of the greatest, I read Lazy Man's Performance, you know, if you want to performance test your calves, he said, you know, if you strip them and ship them, you know, it won't work. But if you wean your calves, you just, you know, wean your calves, and then you go through and sort off the calves that you know, don't like, and turn them back out with cows and gather the pairs and ship the pairs, you know, cow and the calf, you know. So
that calf will rat out his mother every time.
that's right.
All right, if we don't have any other questions, and I should give a pause to make sure we don't. Daniel, did you have a question? I see you just moved your mic.
Yeah, I just noticed Walter mentioned including the trucking costs and the inventory value, which we haven't been doing.
On, I mean, as in adding that to the purchase price,
Well, like reducing the value of the inventory,
Yeah,
or what
reduce
it
the
would
value,
cost to
right?
ship it out.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If that's a
right.
big enough number to worry about sometimes, or. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that.
Right.
One thing, though, can I say something about doing that? One
bet.
thing I like to do, and this is in the stocker cattle business, I like to have everything on that cattle invoice to my chute, so I understand this is the cost of the cattle that came from Florida that had 1,300 miles in them. This is the cost of the cattle that came from Veneta, Oklahoma that had 10 miles in them.
Yep.
And I like to have all of those costs on that invoice if I can possibly do it.
Yeah, and that's the equalizer, right? So that gives you the opportunity to buy from Florida or from 10 miles away.
Yep.
And then the price at the chute is what really matters. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Just
Now,
for clarification, John, how do you
Go
run your shop then in terms of that? Like, are you rolling in all our transaction costs, hauling, sale barn fees? Are you rolling all that into the inventory account as well? Or
well,
is
those
inventory just the strict market value of the cattle?
set the second.
Got it. Okay.
So we now what Wally's talking about is the process of running the invoices. What we do again is the market value. So Walter, I think you used an example earlier where you bought a cow at $1,900 and then you put her in inventory at $1,200. Well, if the market really is at $1,200 and you bought her at $1,900, I don't care what you paid for her. I don't care what the trucking is. I care what she's worth at your house. And I think the question Daniel was asking is, do we need to discount our cattle at the house? So for example, if Tyler takes stuff to the barn, we don't want to just use what he gets at the barn. We want to use barn minus commission fee, brand inspection, sell certificate, trip to the barn, right? And even shrink. So I think that's a fair thing to think about. For some people, that's not much of an issue. My goal is always to sell off the ranch. So the price is at the ranch, but if you're selling away from there and using that price, we better make sure we do a little bit of a correction. Is that fair?
Right. That's fair.
And again, in all of these things, my preference is to be a little under on my inventory value and then add a little when I actually make the sale. I don't want to be wildly under. I want to be pretty much accurate, but I sure rather add a little bit to what I'm expecting than subtract. I just feel better about that for myself. So we do stay with the, Ranching for Profit, I think describes it as they use conservative and consistent. We just dropped the consistent part. We're still using a reasonably conservative value. I am not assuming that I'm going to be topping anybody's sale.
And one point I think disagree with, you're talking about selling at the ranch.
Yep.
And then selling at the sale barn. Now are you talking about backing out all of the costs of selling? I mean,
In the inventory value.
dun, 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 dun.
Right.
I will have to ponder that. And
Okay.
I think we're getting into the weeds and we're going to get righteous because of it, but that's just.
Well, again, I think we're using a value that, the commission and the trucking to the local sale barn aren't gonna have an impact.
Right.
If you're trying to cut that deal too close, you will get in a lot of trouble.
Right.
Yep. All right. Any other questions before I switch gears to inventory forms? All right. If you are not already in our experimental group, Walter, I'm going to take the screen if that's all right. If you
That'd
are
be
not
great, man.
already in our experimental group, you are going to start seeing some forms come from us. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Yeah. Try that again. Should look like an Excel spreadsheet.
It's bouncing out.
Yeah. Got it.
Yep.
Got it? Okay. All right. What we've done is made a couple of different options here, and I'm going to go back. We talked at our meeting down in Oklahoma, and even before that, about the fact that the most profitable customers we see are often implementing the ranching for profit principles and the Bud Williams marketing principles, as taught by Doug and Wally and a number of others. The other thing we see pretty consistently is that people are keeping good track of their inventory are also outperforming people that are not. And so with that justification, I would like to push all of you towards keeping better track of your inventory. And as Walter and Wally have mentioned, there are times when inventory can become a real pain in the butt, and especially if it's, 11 months later and we're trying to figure out what happened basically the prior year. So we've got a couple of different spreadsheet forms that we'd like to start using with people, and I strongly encourage you to work with your staff accountant to do this reporting once a month. Some of you already have something very similar in place, so don't worry about that if you already do. But for those of you that don't, what these forms entail is roughly 4 tables. And the first 2 tables is stuff you fill in, and the second 2 tables are things that auto-calculate. And what we are trying to wind up with in the end is a correct value of your inventory to go on the balance sheet and the correct inventory change value to go on your P&L. And the goal is that those always match up. So that assumes we have good starting numbers, that sort of thing. But if you can see this form, what this is, and I'm going to show you a couple different versions of this. Don't be put off by any of the individual forms, please. But the first table is just a count of what you own. So how many cows, how many bulls, how many stocker steers, how many feeder lambs, et cetera. And that count is updated by you each month. Okay, this is not, this does not necessarily need to be a hard count each month by you, but it can be an estimate based on sales, purchases, and what is dead, or what is wandered in, I guess, if you don't live in a brand area. Those are these are actual estimates. Now I do recommend a regular hard count, right? So preg check, weaning, those sorts of things we do get, whenever we're treating feet, that sort of thing on sheep, whenever you're running those through, let's get a good count to go with it and true them up. But this is provided by you. Okay, so the first table is a count, and it's done each month. And the second table is a price. And this number is exactly the number Daniel was asking about, which is essentially, the value of that animal, fair market value for that animal at the ranch. And so, for example, cow values, this is where we deviate from ranching for profit, right? Cow values might start at one place, they might wander to a very different place, and and then continue on from there. And then the next 2 tables are essentially summaries. So this is a total of our value by enterprise, okay, which is where we want the balance sheet to be. So our cow-calf enterprise, for example, in this case, has a total value of $10,300 at the beginning and a $13,500 at the end. But you might notice that it's like $90,000 in the middle. Don't take any of these numbers as meaningful. They just are what they are. The stockers, the ewes and lambs, the feeder lambs, goats, that sort of thing. And then the bottom is the change. And so this number in this table relates to what is on your balance sheet. And this number relates to the net of the opening and closing values of your P&L. So if you recall, in the trading account, that is comprised of the opening value, the purchases, the sales, the transfers, and then the closing value. We subtract the opening value, we add the closing value. When we do this in a monthly system instead of annually in QuickBooks, we have to use this inventory value change where we put those 2 numbers together and just come up with a net. So if you added to your inventory value, right? So if you have 6 weight stockers and they're going up in value, then there's an increase. And if you have 7 weight steers that you decide to sell, you wind up with revenue, but then your inventory actually, the value might decrease if you don't replace those. And then we have another worksheet here. Something else we're rolling in is trying to get a worksheet that tracks transfers, because these can get a little messy also. All right, I'm going to show you a different version of this same spreadsheet. I think this other one is one Wally will like better. You are welcome to use whatever version of this you are comfortable with. Okay, I don't want to make your life harder, but this actually for my brain, this works better. We have each enterprise, basically each class of animals on a different tab. So here we've broken out the cows and we've done it by age. Okay, so once they get to that 2016 and older, you know, they get lumped. You can track more age categories if you want there. That's not a problem. If you don't know, I really want to get people more in the habit at prig check, at weaning, that sort of thing, whenever is convenient, of getting a good count at least once a year of what your age distribution is. We will work on that as we go. Some of you already have that, some of you don't. You know, if a cow dies, we don't necessarily need to go check her tag and figure out what year she is, but it'd be great to have an estimate, you know, of, okay, we had 2 cows die, you know, they're probably older cows. We can just kind of, again, these can be estimates in between real cows. Same thing, we have a value for each of those classes of cows. And just like Wally is saying, our life very much reflects this, the sheep bell curve here, as I'm going to show it right there. And then the cow bell curve, as I'm going to show it right there. And so we do not value all cows the same. We know that these prime of their life cows are worth more. What exactly the value is and what the age breakout or where they break over to be, you know, cull cows is another matter. But we put a value on those, and then the same. This will auto calculate the total inventory value, and then it will auto calculate the inventory change. So this becomes the number on your balance sheet. Actually, excuse me, would come the value on your balance sheet for your cow-calf enterprise, your breeding stock. And then this would be the value at the end of the month on your P&L for your inventory change, the net of the open and close. Walter, did I hear you make a comment? No? Okay, we're good. All right, then this version of this sheet is broken out so that cow-calf is one tab, heifers are another tab. We got 558 6-weight heifers. We figure they're worth $1,100. That gives us a total value of 613, and we started with 0, so that was our increase also. We've got some steers here. We went from 261 down to 26. We were valued at $807 a head. Now we're at 750. Our inventory value went down quite substantially. That number is reflected on our P&L inventory change. Feeder cattle, these would be like cattle on feed. So this is, you know, 750 plus, let's say. Similar, we have another transfer sheet there, and then in this one we have, and we have most of these locked up, so you can only change certain things. But this gives, these essentially become the numbers that get entered into QuickBooks in the end. And again, these are the numbers that allow us to calculate a gross margin every month when we do that. There are months that I like to think about when you get into June, July, in the cow-calf business, there just isn't a lot going on. So when we talk about being conservative there, to my mind, I'm not necessarily going to go look at the June sale report and see that 4 cows sold for $600 and then completely wipe out my inventory value. I might kind of punt around there for a little bit. Same thing in the summer, you know, July, actually stockers are probably tracking back up, but oftentimes in May and June, and even December, sometimes there'll be kind of a lull there where you just don't have real good market information. There's nothing wrong in my mind. Walter may disagree with this. In my mind, there's nothing wrong with just sort of holding that same value for a month to get you through that early summer period when there isn't much market activity, or the midwinter period when things can get weird. George, you mentioned, you know, closing sale barns, people can't get around, that sort of thing. We've had you know, we've had 2 months of it's just been difficult to get stuff marketed. There's been weird volumes at the sales. People haven't been there to be buying. Like I say, I'm comfortable squishing our way through that a little bit, and understanding that the fundamentals haven't changed. There's just some behavior that's going on that we're going to kind of ignore. We're going to see it as noise and ignore that. So anyway, we're going to send out a copy of this to everybody. I would like you to visit with your staff accountant about what version of this sheet you would like to focus on. All of these are very customizable. So we've made, with the people we've worked with on this already, we've made very specific versions. We can do that. It's not that hard. We just kind of want to get something locked down. And then we share this as an Excel sheet, just like a Google sheet where we can both work on it. We can see what you do on it when you make changes. And we can update this monthly. Questions on that?
Well, I can say one thing, like Mr. Burtis, so man, I grew up with it. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's sure gonna be interesting.
Never know. I never know what it means when there are no questions.
Well,
It's a very hard thing to read over Zoom.
well, to me, we just need to start, you know.
Yep.
and,
That's where we're at.
John,
Lisa, your
is there any-
question?
Oh, looks like Grant had a question too. Grant, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Grant.
Sure, John, is there any benefit in like going throughout the month? Let's say, yesterday I bought a load of cattle. Is there any benefit in jumping on and filling that out right away? Or is it just the same just to do it all at once at the end of the month?
Great question. I don't have any problem if you want to jump in and make sequential entries in there. You go by on the 10th, you go buy 5, you add them on there, you go on the 20th, buy 5 more, add them on there. That's no problem to me. Now, Daniel's only going to put them in your P&L once a month.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but if that helps you keep track of things as you go, I think that's a great idea. That's actually how I do mine. And so I enter mine as, like, when I buy 15 heads, I'll put it in as 15, and then I might go and buy 20 head, then I might go and buy 2 head or 1 head. I'll put them in that way, so that when I go back and look at this cell, this formula kind of prompts me like, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking when I did that. Totally up to you.
No, I affirm that deal of what John just said there. You can make it easy on yourself by doing that 15, 20 and 1, in the process there. That's a great way to do it, because you're actually giving some detail, on what, and if you want, you can actually, Grant, put a note in there if you need to. I mean, click on that cell, John.
Hang on one second.
Yeah, and see where it says new comment?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
That worked, and then that's held there.
Okay. Now, Grant, you don't have any deaths though, right?
Right.
Anyway, that hopefully that is helpful. And again, the idea being, if we are working on this every month and we have questions and we contact you in theory. Now, again, I remember what I had for lunch, and I can even think of breakfast. And for dinner, we had birthday cake. So I can actually remember last night's dinner, but it's hard to remember stuff from just the other day, but it's really hard to remember it from 6 months ago. So the idea being is, if we're doing a regular review of this, we're on top of it. And I think, Grant, is the more frequently you use this, the more useful it is. And here's the funny thing about inventory. Inventory is one of those deals that the more I am on top of it, the easier it is, because I'm making, frequent small changes. Infrequent large changes are where the trouble comes. Now, I will say, frequent small changes, if you don't write them down and you don't look at them for 8 months, Olson, those are hard also to do. But if I am frequently making those small changes in the worksheet, it's pretty easy to keep track of.
Now, John, is there a feed version of this as well? I mean, do we need to be tracking feed, or is that not typically an issue?
No, that's right. If you've got feed, we absolutely can. We've got a couple of different spreadsheets for that also. And they'll just be different tabs in the same spreadsheet. Yes. And again, just work with Daniel to get that set up in your case, but just work with your staff account. Josie's built some beautiful ones. Josie actually built one for Wally that I think she and Daniel need to have some kind of competition, because it's awfully pretty. So, and again, the idea is that it's pretty easy to use. Eric is going to be very excited about this, I know.
No, I'm not. It's a very nice looking spreadsheet, but I have spreadsheet ego. I always have a hard time using somebody else's spreadsheet.
Oh, it's
But
impossible.
I'll get
to look
over
at
it.
someone
I'll get
else's.
over it. Hey,
Possible.
that question about feed though triggers another question. So are we valuing hay on a market basis as well, as far as you're concerned,
Yep,
John?
yep.
Really? I get it. I get it. But from a managerial accounting perspective, isn't that slightly problematic? Like,
Why is that?
well, I don't know. I'm just thinking of how I would use that information.
Does it depend on if you're gonna sell it or if there's a chance you would sell it?
No, like I understand that's the reason why we would value it at market price to make those kind of decisions. But if I sniffed out a really good deal on hay, right? And
Right.
only because I got a really good deal on hay, I choose to buy some cattle to overwinter them. If we all of a sudden take that hay and value it at market price, isn't that gonna kind of skew some of my decisions? Like the
Well,
only
you
reason
coulda
why I
just
bought
sold
those
that hay.
cattle. What's that?
You could have just sold that hay to the market at its true value then.
Absolutely. But I'm gonna get more of an aggregate value by buying cows. And I'll make more money by putting it through a cow. And this particular example.
Yeah, but then,
But I guess that's why we're all doing our own managerial accounting style spreadsheets on the side, right, John?
but, Eric, to me, what you need, when you're doing that is, just like, you need to sell it at market, and then if it still works, it works, but don't subsidize those cows with cheap hay, in my humble opinion,
Just sell it to yourself at market price.
And then,
Because
then
in a
profit
lot
on-
of ways, you're not marketing your labor at the correct cost either. If I mean, you got to value your labor to feed that hay out too. And if you're not valuing the hay at the correct cost, you're not valuing your labor at the correct cost either.
No, I get all that, guys. It was more just a random rant. Yeah, no, I get it.
The other thing is if you can buy it really cheaply, you might want to reconsider what that market is. Because if you bought it, that's a market.
Exactly. And I think that's where I'm going with that. I think that's where I'm going with it because there is no hay market where I'm from.
Yeah,
The market is what you buy it for.
right.
So maybe that's kind of what
You might need to think that through a little. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And this is a problem. Everybody will run around and say, oh, hay's worth $300 a ton. Well, if you can't sell it for $300 a ton, then yours is not worth $300 a ton. That's important.
No,
right.
no, there is no stable market price on hay, not even close.
Right.
Like it's complete market anarchy where we're at. So no, that your last comment was quite helpful. The market is simply what you bought it for. Don't overthink it.
Yeah. But again, if you buy it for $100 and can sell it for $200, it's in your stack at $200.
You got it.
Make no mistake about it. When you file an insurance claim, when that stack burns down, I guarantee you're going to ask for $200.
You got it, right.
Okay, Lisa, I put you off a minute. Let's see what you got. I think I saw you around to George's screen a minute ago, right?
Yeah, just gotta
Either
keep
that or
moving.
there's some other woman in George's house.
Yeah, that'd make me a little murdery. No, so the question that I had was more like, so I'm like all about forecasting.
Yes.
And so if you're going to be forecasting out like your inventory changes, especially in like a retail type situation, is it best to have that conservative and consistent for your forecasting and then update it to your actuals as you go through like the year and into the future? So you can compare your plan to your actuals to make sure you're on point.
Oh, that is a very good question. Walter, I really want to hear your opinion on this.
Well, I mean, I would probably be conservative on your forecasting at least. You with me? All
Mhm.
Okay, and that way, I mean, really what you're trying to do is, I mean, it was back to when we were talking there earlier, is you really want to end up and figure out in the, you know, how much of it was marketing in the end, even, I mean, you can do the deal of your plan, well, I don't like to say plan here because that's not a good word with in the Bud Williams mindset, but anyway, you can actually compare that forecasted number to what your actual is, and you want to break that apart in the process. I don't know if you're doing that. You know, and I can help you through that if you want to see some examples.
Yeah, eventually, probably not today, but eventually for sure.
Yeah.
My other question is as it relates to like niche markets, niche, whatever. So we have a pastured pork operation, and so again, that you know, when you're looking at markets and like kind of doing some of those value transfers, is it best to compare against like actual comparables, or should you be pulling from the conventional market? Like it's kind of weird when it's a pasture raised chicken or a pasture raised pork because it's entirely different than like a Yorkshire that came off a slap barn. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So should you be comparing like, I don't even know, like would you pull that from like Facebook Marketplace? Like what does that look like, I guess?
Great question. Walter, you want to take that one too?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, you can't use, you know, I mean, it was a Berkshire or Duroc or whatever, you're gonna probably have to get your own, you know, kind of base your own market, because it's not gonna be off of the, you know, say, I mean, I'm just using this as a.
The
as a-
Iowa feeder hog sale report.
Yeah,
It's
or
very different.
the generics, what the generic stuff that goes through a sale barn. So I mean, there'll be a, you know, there'll be a value. You've got a higher value item, and I mean, you know, or do you go to Whole Foods and say take half of it? But anyway.
Yeah.
But the goal is to make that transfer very fair. And the reason I keep pushing
Right.
for that is I see too many situations where the enterprise analysis is highly skewed because the transfer values are highly skewed. So for example, in your case, if you transferred all of those pigs in at a commodity, you know, just a commodity barn pig type price, right? You would make your, you know, your breeding piglet enterprise look terrible, while your feeder pig enterprise would look fantastic. One of the nice things about some of the aggregators that have shown up in that marketplace is that there actually is kind of a wholesale price that appears for some of these things that have been hard to price.
Right.
So is it Thousand Lakes out of Minnesota, I think, right? Isn't that, is it Thousand Lakes? 10,000?
Thousand Hills.
Thousand
Thousand
Hills.
Hills, that's it. Yeah, sorry, I got my Minnesota things confused. You know, they actually do buy grass-fed calves live to slaughter, and so they don't pay what you get out of a, you know, out of a fully butchered, processed, delivered animal, but it does give you an idea of what that animal's worth kind of as a wholesale value.
Right.
And again, it's harder in some of the other things. The pigs and chickens are a little harder, but I think the goal and the thing you always have to keep in mind is that you are being fair to both enterprises. You want a real evaluation of whether the first part or the second part is significantly more or less profitable than the opposite.
So in that vein, if you have cull animals, like we'll take slipped heifers and stuff like that and put some fat on them and throw them on a hanger, and all of a sudden they're worth gold. So is it, when you're doing that specific type of transfer, should it be a market transfer? Because essentially she's terminal anyways.
Yep, that's
So
right.
either, okay, so all cull animals should, like true culls, I guess, as compared to the market, should go. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because what you're doing is when you make that over, because it's really, you're really moving that from say that cow calf, it's almost like you're doing a marketing piece or whatever when you do that, when you upgrade it and get it processed. Okay. Yep.
Now, when you do that, it makes that beef enterprise specifically, right? Buying open cows, turning them into cut, wrapped, processed, delivered beef. That is a very, very profitable enterprise, right?
Well, it is, but it's also like, so a cull cow, I mean, she's worth 80 cents and, or she's worth 60 or 80 cents, depending on the time of year. And if you have to feed her for any portion of the year, it's going to be some pretty nasty looking numbers if you do that value transfer. So, I think it's just like, you don't want to inflate the numbers, but also you don't want to make that enterprise look like absolute trash compared to the market. So it's just kind of an interesting numbers game, I guess.
Right. Yeah. The nice thing about the thing I love about livestock, cows specifically, sheep are the same way, as there are real markets, right? It's so easy to actually come up with a good estimate.
Yeah.
And this thing that we struggled with, and it was a bit of a light bulb moment. I mean, like, it's all about the people. It's all about us. Like, where do you want the profit to be in your business? Are you a direct to consumer marketing business? And that's where you want to show a big slice of pie. In that case, be biased towards that. And that's what we used to be, right? Now we're more commodity cattle, and we just do the value adding, turning into meat as like a little sideline thing, as like a safety valve. So we want to be more biased towards the live cattle selling and buying. But this is where I think it's helpful. I mean, it's really cool that we're breaking these things down so we can ensure that we're not subsidizing each other, right? That's all great. But at the end of the day, it's one business. And so put all those numbers together, all of them. It doesn't really take away all the classes, take away all the different trading accounts and all the transfers, and look at that final number. That was very helpful for us, because we were just getting too caught up on these individual enterprises, and that's helpful. But at the end of the day, they're not individual businesses responsible to individual owners. They're all working for me. And so we would dissect it, analyze, and then put it all back together. Does that make sense, John? And the way you do your books, it does that, right? You should be able to lump it all together.
Correct. You always get a total. And I think we go below the total while we are diagnosing. And I always go back to Alan Nation's, allocation of capital. That's the problem, right? So if you have 4 different enterprises, maybe there are 3 that are high performers. You want to make sure you cut out that 4th one and get that capital reallocated to a high performer. But yes, I agree with you. In the end, when we talk about things like debt service, right, we're talking about the number at the bottom or close to the bottom of your P&L, right? We're not talking about all of the individual columns. What we want to make sure is that we have enough understanding of the individual columns that we understand what is driving profit and what is sucking in our business. And I think cutting those things out, adding to the good ones, is where we want to focus. I do argue a little with your bias, your number towards what you want to do. I've seen too many places where people have, for example, a farm and a feedlot, and they put all of the farm products into the feedlot at cost. And what you see is in 10 years, the operating costs on that farm are absolutely out of control, because there is never any pushback on what the price of those goods going into the feedlot is. And so the feedlot winds up looking terrible. Well, it's buying everything at cost. Well, that seems like it would be cheaper, except when you never compare your cost to market, believe it or not, over a decade, your costs will be out of control, because people do they do a better and better job. They add more and more quality. They kill every last weed, right? They get every last inch irrigated. And in doing that, they incur exponentially higher costs. And there's an incentive thing that I am always very cognizant of. And again, Ron Baker, who Walter Lynn introduced me to, talks a lot about this. We have to be very, very careful about what our metrics are, because our metrics often will drive performance. And I love to use Wells Fargo Bank as a poster child of well-intentioned metrics that then drove people to do very bad things. And that whole bank they've done this 3 or 4 times. You know, they have come up with good metrics trying to do things, and people have responded to the metric, not to the purpose of the metric. So again, I'm going to go back to the comment you made about what type of business do you want to be in. If anything, I would bias myself a little bit against the type of business I want to be in, because I want to make sure I want to be in the right business.
No,
And
that's a good point.
change strategy pretty dramatically after some real world feedback, right?
No, I guess the point I'm making is that especially in Annalise's and in our contacts where we do have a little bit of a direct to consumer and there really is no
Yes.
market price
Right.
discovery, is that we have the power to manipulate, which is a double-edged sword. And we just have to be
Right.
careful of that.
Yep.
Yeah, but it can be used. It's a tool, use it, but you might blow yourself up doing it too.
But that's what you like to do, blow it up and then put it back together again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing you weren't a demolition guy in the military. That really does. Hey, let me go back to another thing that Annalise touched on in her comment. We talk about indicators, you know, KPIs, that sort of thing periodically. One thing that a friend of mine and I just talked about the other, it's been a couple weeks, I guess now, but one thing that we want to be looking at are some leading indicators whenever we can. And market ready livestock is an excellent example of a leading indicator. So do you have animals that are ready to go to the sale? Now, they may not be overvalued and they may not be the animal to sell, but are, you know, if you've bought cutter bulls as an example, there's about a month period where they really can't go to the sale. Okay, so the lead is that those bulls are at least 30 days from being marketed and probably more if they're not already overvalued. Once something becomes overvalued and it is an animal that you are happy to, you know, put in front of somebody else or offer to someone else at a dollar price, those are market ready animals. If you have a very small percentage of your inventory market ready, the leading indicator is that your near-term cash flow is going to be poor. Whereas if you have a lot of market-ready animals, that leading indicator would tell you that your near-term cash flow could be quite good. Okay, we always have this problem in financials that we're always looking back. My goal is to not be looking back very far and not be looking forward very far. Annalise, you mentioned the annual budget also. I have become so disenchanted with annual budgets. I can hardly stand myself. But at the same time, I understand we need to do it, right? But we do the budgeting process. I heard someone describe this recently and I absolutely loved it. A budget is what helps you make decisions today based on what you can see in the future. But tomorrow the future is different and what you do might be different. And I think this was a lot of what Bud was trying to teach us about living in today. You still have an outlook, but that outlook, again, I'll go back a year. That outlook from February last year to May last year changed drastically in the Western US because nobody had grass. So it didn't matter what they said was going to happen in February. None of that stuff came true because the underlying, the underlying assumptions all turned out to be wrong. So this idea of market ready livestock is a real leading indicator. And then making sure, the other thing about valuing inventory on a monthly basis is it really makes sure that we check what we have forecasted against reality. And as I become more a fan of forecasting over budgeting, that idea that you change next month based on what you're seeing now, as opposed to leaving it, based on what you thought was going to happen 6 months ago, I think becomes very, very important. And it makes for a much more dynamic business.
Hey, John, can I add a comment on that?
You bet, Lauren. Glad you're here.
Yeah. I'm very familiar and dislike the budget process just as much as you. And I've come to learn over the years that, budget is your best guess looking a year forward. And forecasting, you start off in the same spot, but in most companies I've worked for, you adjust your forecast at least quarterly based on your actuals that have come in. So budget is like your best guess. Forecast is maybe trying to get closer with what the market's actually doing. But I find forecasting much more helpful than the budget numbers for sure.
Love it. That's very good. And for example, in the business that you are currently working in, and maybe even more so at your former job, I mean, how wrong were you? Go back to Texas. So Lauren used to work for an energy company. You were working for the energy company during COVID, right?
Yes, that's right.
So
Yep.
I'm sure they had all kinds of fantastic forecasts or budgets, if you will, for what they were going to sell energy for in January 2020. Is that right? And then about 20th of March or the 20th of April 2020, those were completely unrecognizable, right?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for us too, they built a lot of pipelines, and so, everything got more expensive. So just the capital project expenditures, which are necessary to move the natural gas, those budgets were completely wrong too. So it's kind of not beating yourself up too much, but having an explanation. And that's what I find important is, if you're going to build a budget each year, leave yourself some breadcrumbs, if you will, of what happened. Because when you look back, just like those formulas in Excel, and you're like, okay, where did this number come from? No one needs to do that. That's not a great use of time.
That's a huge time suck that doesn't produce much value, right?
For sure.
Right. Well, and the other problem I have with budgeting right now is the anchoring phenomenon. So that most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the psychological phenomenon of anchoring. You walk onto a used car lot, you say, "What's the price?" And the guy says $20,000. Well, you were thinking the car was worth $4,000, but because he said 20, you don't say 4, you say, "Oh, maybe it should be 12." And the problem with budgeting is that it's sometimes, I believe, that anchoring phenomena keeps us from dealing with reality. And the reality is what's in front of us. And we want to sort of wipe our brain of anything we might have conceived prior to that.
And that's especially true in like the sell by context, right? Like if we're supposed to be living every day, just boom, 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 boom. Grant has no idea how many head of cattle he's going to have in 3 months. So it's kind of futile for him to budget that. But what he can do is have a range and make sure he has enough resources, right, to support that contingency if it does happen either way. But I never thought of, I also hate budgets, but in the sell by world, I can see why it's a double waste of time.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in the future. Right, Walter?
Yeah, that's one thing that John and I have been talking about too, is, I think where some of this is going is, I think, historically, the bankers or whatever, well, they want a monthly cash flow or whatever. Well, really what they're really wanting to know, I think, is how much sensitivity can you, if your expenses go up, I'm just saying a number, 10%, and your revenues are down 5% and interest goes up 3%, those are the kind of questions I think we need to be thinking about, versus, are we, is our line of credit, 100,000 or 115,000. I think we need to be looking at it's back to what we were talking about there earlier, Eric, is, sometimes we got to think about the nuggets that are out there that we can actually try to manage differently. That's where I'm coming from.
Can I say something? I need to go, and
Me too.
and I've got a deal for all of you. I am selling a tuition to my marketing school on the Pottawatomie County, Kansas benefit auction for the new show barn. I promise you it's going to be a deal. And so if somebody wants to submit a bid to me, I would gladly pass it on.
I'm a big fan of these charity auctions of bidding more than the actual price, but this is a case where you could bid lower than the price. And
You can bid, you can probably want to start out at $50 on this deal.
Oh,
That's-
it's for a good cause.
We're kind of in an area where nobody knows exactly. I've been gone for 40 some years,
It's worse than valuing Annalise's chickens, right?
Yep.
I was gonna say, you guys open up a whole new can of worms. Like, how do sell by marketing principles work in a charity auction context? Is it the opposite? Should we
It
be
works
selling?
You have so much
overvalued
extra,
or undervalued and buying undervalued.
Well,
have so
whatever, I
much
just
extra
want to
cash,
put
you
it
can
out
be
there for
generous.
everybody. Contact me if you're interested and we will go from there. How's that?
That's great. Hey, we're at 2 hours. My bladder has reached its capacity. So I think let's wrap this sucker up. I am really glad that you all came. Thank you very much. If you've got more questions and comments, please reach out to us. You will see an email from us about inventory forms shortly. And if you're one of our customers, and we will talk. We're going to do this again in about a month. We are in the process. I am in the process of, as I was asked by a number of people, of getting these notices out a little earlier. So we are working on that. Expect to see some changes for the next one. So have a great afternoon, and we will talk soon.